Joining us now, folks, is Dr. David Markwell from Ridgeline Counseling. Today's topic for Dr. Markwell is depression. Dr. Markwell, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Brian. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I can't complain. Now, our topic for today is depression, and my question to you is so general, but I really think a lot of us don't know what is it. Is it a bad day where you just feel the blues for a day and you say get over it? So put it together. What is depression?
Sure, and that's a really good way of leading into that. Let me start by saying that two words that I would remind people to be aware of is one is feeling, like an emotion, and the other is a mood. A feeling, I think, is what you were just describing. It can be impacted. It's more short term. It can be impacted by events in our life. Maybe we were hoping that we would get a raise, or the outcome of something didn't go the way that we wanted, and so we're kind of feeling down and in the blues kind of thing. But that's more of an emotional response or a feeling response. What's usually talked about with regard to depression is more of a mood, and there are really, and we're not going to really talk about bipolar and other types of mood disorders, but in particular, what's commonly called major depressive disorder, sometimes called clinical depression. There's also what's called persistent depressive disorder. It used to be called dysthymia. And then something, I will say recent, but not recent in the sense of a year or two, but within the last decade or two, something that's referred to as seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. And that has to do with the changing of seasons and how that people respond to those changes. And so there really is a difference between a feeling, like you were talking about, people feeling kind of down for something, maybe our team lost, or something along those lines, versus a mood.
We are going into, we're in fall, the leaves change, they start falling, and I did not realize this for years, but that kind of, the seasonal change, I do know people that they get depressed. When you change the time and it's dark earlier, you just don't feel as upbeat. And is that something that is common, very common, or is that? And if you feel that way, if somebody feels that way, like, is that something we should be concerned about ourselves if the seasons change and it changes our moods?
And that's a good point. About 5% of the United States population is impacted by SAD, or seasonal affective disorder. Some people refer to it as winter blues, although it actually can be something that impacts us anytime there's a seasonal change. If I remember correctly, the terms like equinox, the vernal equinox in the springtime, and then the one that's in the autumn and in the fall. But in particular with the wintertime, around November, December, January, people can be impacted by it, and it's not just a feeling they're having. Of course, some people don't like the fact that it gets dark at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and it cuts into some of the things they'd like to be doing. But seasonal affective disorder would be more along the lines of what we were talking about with the mood, and the person is being impacted by it. A lot of it has to do with less sunlight during the daytime. And so one of the treatments that is used very often is, and you can purchase these online, there are actually light bulbs that are built and created to mimic sunlight to a certain point, and they actually will encourage people to purchase those lights, not for their whole house, but maybe like one particular lamp. And they will ask people to buy that light bulb and sit and read or watch television for 15, 20, 30 minutes with that light each day, and that it actually helps to reduce the impact of seasonal affective disorder.
Okay, explain, what I have down here on the sheet, explain major depressive disorder.
Major depressive disorder is, by definition, what's usually referred to as clinical depression. And clinical meaning that it is something that pretty much knocks a person out of any type of life activities for several weeks. And it is, the typical symptoms where they lose interest in things that they like to do, and it can impact their sleeping and their eating. But it is something that definitely can create a lot of disability. In fact, it's the leading cause of disability in the United States for ages 15 to 44. So it is something that is very, very common. And in fact, it impacts about over 16 million Americans, 18 and older, every year. So it is a very common thing. A lot of times people who will go into a treatment facility or a behavioral health facility for depression are not really being impacted by seasonal affective disorder, but it would be more of the major depressive disorder.
Okay, what about persistent depressive disorder?
Yeah, that's the one that used to be called, and you can even find it on the internet, it used to be called dysthymia. The way that I actually picture it is major depressive disorder, it would be similar to like having a high-grade fever, one that is to the point where you don't feel like getting out of bed, you don't feel like doing anything, you don't feel like eating, you can't rest, you just feel very, very irritable and miserable. Dysthymia, or this persistent depressive disorder, actually is more like a low-grade just depression that it's like a little gray cloud that hangs around us, and it's kind of hard for us to shake it. It can last up to 2 years or longer, and the person they can get through life, they can get up and go to work, they can get up and go to school, but they may not fully feel like themselves on a regular basis, whereas major depressive disorder will basically make us ridden, or where we are in some type of treatment facility where we just simply can't do anything.
Well, let me ask you this, and how about myself? Let's say myself with friends. Now, in general, and I'll just say this: I don't get depressed. Okay, I do admittedly, on a rainy Saturday afternoon, listen to Carpenter's music every once in a while.
Right.
Okay, but outside of that, seriously, we're all, I think, wired to have a downtime from time to time. But how do we recognize it as friends? How do we take it serious and not say, hey, man, just get up, get your shoes on, let's go, or get over it? Because sometimes I think myself or others, we might just say, hey, get over it, and we don't really understand what someone's going through.
That's a really good point. A lot of times, like you were talking about, the old rainy days and Mondays always get us down kind of thing. We sometimes have those types of things, but that's more of that feeling.
Right.
And sometimes we do need some encouragement from our friends when we're experiencing those. What we want to really look for is where it's more of a constant in that person's life, and it's lasting for a period of time, to the point where, like with clinical depression, they aren't showing up at work for days, or they're not involving themselves, engaging with their children like they used to, or as some of the symptoms are, they will start either overeating or not eating at all, or they'll oversleep or not be able to sleep at all. And so there's this drastic kind of change that's going on. And when that begins to occur, then we have other things that I'd like to discuss at some future point with you, which you have to be very aware of, other things that can be impacted by, where the person not only feels depressed, but then they also have thoughts about life not being worth living anymore, and then suicidal kind of thoughts can kind of come into play as well.
I would like to get an opportunity to share that with you one day, a personal story of my own, where a dear friend, I actually did not know they were going through depression, and I did not know the extent of some of their problems they were dealing with. And I kind of had an attitude of, hey, get over it, come on, let's go to the ball game kind of attitude. And I'm just going to say that point blank. And it did end up in my friend committing suicide, and I didn't recognize it. I didn't recognize it. And I mean, I'd love to share that with you one day, and maybe we could do a segment on that. But it stunned me, and the thing I like to share with you and the viewers, it's something where you need to understand this individual is somebody I talk to about 4 times a day. It did not realize this until it happened. So, and that's why I really am persistent with you and asking you like some of the things we can look for. And I know our time is short, and I know we'll do more segments because I know there's more people out there like me that don't know 100% what to look for. And if we recognize depression, how do you approach somebody? And when I say it like that, not that we're the professionals, but we recommend see some of the signs. How do you recommend to somebody like myself to approach that person or help them deal with it or get them help?
Sure. Well, and I think having friends and loved ones that, you know, are aware of sometimes the signs and symptoms. And as you mentioned, Brian, sometimes you may not actually see them, or they're very good at keeping them kind of behind the scenes where people aren't aware of what's going on in their life. But what I always encourage people to do is, you know, if you start noticing some changes within a loved one or a friend, it's okay to talk with them and just be an encouragement to them. And then we also, if anyone's ever interested, we are happy. We have a free depression screening assessment that if anybody wants to, they can contact us, come by the office. We give it to them free of charge. And it basically gives a rating scale of severity. And then based on that, we can also talk to them about some of the options that they might have for them, counseling, speaking to a medical professional, or other types of options.
So you offer a screening evaluation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Dr. David we're on the line with Dr. David Markwell, Ridgeline Counseling. And Dr. Markwell, one more time, if these things are going on in your life, or you feel you may suffer from one of them, or you have a loved one, they can contact you, and you have that's where you recommend you start, is getting in touch with you.
Well, and that would be one of the places, even if it's not the person themselves that is the person dealing with depression, if they don't feel like they want to contact, if it's a loved one or a friend that's noticing some changes, they can also give us a call, and we can, you know, talk with them about some of the things that they're seeing, and then hopefully getting the encouragement to the person who's having the depression symptoms to maybe get an assessment. And then sometimes people will just go to their medical professional and just kind of talk about what's going on in their life. And sometimes the medical professional will either recommend medication, or very often will recommend them seeing a behavioral health professional.
Dr. Markwell, is there anything else on this subject today before we close with our topic of depression that you would like to share with the audience? Brian,
I do appreciate, you know, the opportunity to kind of, you know, talk with you about it and bring it to people's attention. And if there's anything that anyone needs, they can contact us, and we'll be happy to assist.
Thank you. We've been on the line with, have a nice day, sir. We've been on the line with Dr. David Markwell, and Dr. David Markwell's with Ridgeline Counseling, and you see there on the screen, 706-314-8807, and he has an office in McCaysville, Georgia. So please don't hesitate. Get in touch with Dr. Markwell at Ridgeline Counseling today, and we'll be right back after these messages.